There is a moment in every life, every career, every business, when the world stops tolerating your mixed signals. You say you value trust, but your actions say convenience. You say you want clarity, but your decisions scream confusion. You say you have a purpose, yet your choices don't match it. The Celery Test is the wake-up call. It's the line in the sand that demands, if you truly know your why, prove it through the things you choose, the habits you build, and the actions you repeat. Because the world is tired of leaders who only talk about purpose. Your team is tired of following someone who hasn't committed. Your life is waiting for you to finally align what you believe with what you do. Today isn't just another speech, it's an invitation. No, an ultimatum. Stop sending mixed messages. Start living your why with discipline, clarity, and courage. When your actions finally match your purpose, the right people will trust you, the right opportunities will find you, and the noise of the world will fall away. This is your moment to act with intention. This is your moment to pass the Celery Test. When your actions don't match your beliefs, you don't just create confusion, you create doubt, instability, and emotional distance in the people who rely on you. Men often underestimate the weight their actions carry, especially in a world where they are expected to be strong, steady, and decisive. When a man says one thing but does another, the people around him don't see a busy man or a distracted man. They see a man they can't fully trust. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship at work, at home, in love, and within himself. When a man projects confidence through his words but hesitates through his actions, he unintentionally sends mixed signals that others must interpret. From a woman's perspective, this inconsistency is not seen as stress or pressure. It's seen as unpredictability. A woman under pressure needs clarity, direction, and congruence. When she observes a man wavering between what he believes and what he does, her instinct is to question his intentions, not because she wants control, but because inconsistency disrupts her sense of emotional safety. His inconsistency becomes her uncertainty. When men drift from their beliefs, they create internal tension they rarely talk about. Men are conditioned to appear composed, even when they're lost. So when their actions betray their deeper values, they feel at first as frustration, then as guilt, and eventually as shame. They know they are acting out of alignment. They know they're not living the standard they expect from themselves. But instead of recalibrating, many men push forward hoping results will somehow justify the dissonance. Yet results built on misalignment never give real satisfaction. They only deepen the internal divide. When a man's actions contradict his purpose, he weakens his influence without even realizing it. Influence isn't built through speeches or promises. It's built when a man consistently demonstrates what he claims to stand for. If he believes in loyalty but flirts with distraction, people see the distraction. If he believes in discipline but indulges in shortcuts, people see the shortcuts. Men don't lose respect because they fail. They lose respect because they act outside their professed beliefs. The world is far more forgiving of an honest mistake than a hypocritical pattern. When women observe a man who acts out of alignment, they don't perceive him as flawed. They perceive him as unsafe, not in a physical sense, but in an emotional and relational sense. A man whose actions contradict his beliefs becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is the enemy of connection. Women naturally look to consistency as a sign of integrity, stability, and reliability. When a man's actions match his principles, he becomes someone she can rely on. When they don't, she questions the relationship, the future, and his true identity. When men understand that alignment creates clarity, they begin to show up differently. Alignment sharpens a man's presence, strengthens his confidence, and quiets the noise in his mind. The moment he begins making decisions that reflect what he truly believes, he becomes easier to understand, easier to trust, and easier to follow. His actions no longer confuse the people around him. They confirm who he is. Purpose means saying no to what doesn't belong in your cart, because every choice a man makes signals to the world what he truly stands for. Men often imagine purpose as something grand, something philosophical, something they'll step into one day, but purpose is far more practical and far more visible than they think. It shows up in the small decisions, what they tolerate, what they prioritize, what they pursue, and what they reject. And every time a man puts something in his cart, whether that's a habit, a relationship, a responsibility, or a distraction, he tells others what truly matters to him, even if it contradicts what he claims to believe. Saying no is one of the purest expressions of purpose. Yet it's also one of the hardest things for men to do. Men are conditioned to take on more, to handle everything, to be the one who can absorb the pressure without flinching. The result is often a life cluttered with commitments and expectations that don't align with their values. A man who doesn't filter what enters his life becomes overwhelmed, unfocused, and reactive. He isn't lacking purpose, he's drowning it under obligations that don't serve him. People around him don't see a strong man. They see a man pulled in every direction except the one that matters. Women pay close attention to what a man says yes to and what he refuses to say no to. From a woman's perspective, a man's clarity is reflected not in what he talks about, but in the boundaries he protects. A man who allows anyone or anything into his life without discernment sends a message of uncertainty, not generosity. Women feel safest with men who know what belongs in their cart and what doesn't, because that discipline shows responsibility, self-control, and a grounded sense of self. When a man can't say no, she doesn't interpret it as kindness. She interprets it as instability. Men often believe that removing things from their cart is a sign of weakness, when in reality it's a sign of strength. It takes courage to admit that certain paths, people, or habits don't fit their purpose. It takes discipline to let go of the things that once felt comfortable but no longer support who they're becoming. And it takes self-respect to recognize that not every opportunity deserves a place in their life. A man who filters his actions through his purpose becomes sharper, more intentional, and more focused. He stops chasing everything and begins choosing only what aligns with who he truly is. Women instinctively trust a man who curates his life with purpose because it shows he's not operating on impulse. She sees a man who knows himself, who protects his energy, who values direction over distraction. She sees a man who doesn't just talk about goals, but structures his decisions around them. When a man lives this way, she doesn't have to question his commitment, his priorities, or his direction. His actions answer those questions for her. A man's no becomes a statement of identity, and his discipline becomes a demonstration of integrity. Clarity creates trust because people instinctively follow what they can predict, understand, and feel secure in. Men often underestimate how much clarity matters, not just in leadership, but in relationships, ambition, and identity. When a man knows who he is and what he stands for, his presence becomes steady. His decisions make sense. His direction is understandable. But when a man is unclear, when his words shift, when his priorities wobble, when his actions contradict his values, he unintentionally creates confusion. And confusion doesn't just weaken connection, it destroys trust long before anyone says it out loud. Confusion kills trust because humans, by nature, look for patterns to feel safe. Women do this especially deeply and intuitively. When a woman interacts with a man, she isn't only listening to what he says, she is watching for alignment. She is observing consistency. She is reading the emotional logic behind his choices. If he says he wants commitment but acts casually, she feels the mismatch immediately. If he says he values honesty but hides small truths, she feels the crack forming beneath the surface. To her, confusion isn't harmless. It's a signal that something is unstable, something she cannot lean on. Men create their own internal confusion when they avoid confronting what they really want. A man who fears disappointing others often spreads himself thin, sending different messages to different people in an attempt to keep the peace. He thinks he's being supportive or adaptable, but he's actually weakening his identity. He begins to lose the strength of a clear direction, and when he loses that strength, others lose confidence in him. His lack of clarity becomes a fog that not only blinds those around him, but blinds him to his own purpose. Predictability is not boring, it is trustworthy. When men understand this, they begin to show up with a consistency that makes people feel anchored. A clear man is not rigid. He is reliable. He can still adapt, still learn, still grow, but the foundation of who he is stays steady. Others understand how he thinks, what he values, and why he makes certain decisions. This clarity builds influence faster than charisma, power, or ambition ever could. A man who is clear is a man others feel safe following. Women respond strongly to clarity because it communicates emotional stability. When a woman sees a man who is clear about his intentions, his boundaries, and his values, she feels grounded. She doesn't have to guess, interpret, or decode his behavior. His clarity allows her to relax her guard, open her trust, and invest fully. A man who brings clarity into a relationship becomes a source of security, not confusion. He becomes someone she can understand, rely on, and align with. And in return, she gives her trust without hesitation. Men reclaim their strength when they choose clarity over confusion. Clarity silences doubts, removes contradictions, and aligns behavior with belief. It transforms interactions, stabilizes relationships, and amplifies a man's influence everywhere he shows up. Clarity becomes the signal that cuts through the noise and tells the world exactly who he is and what he stands for. The discipline to live your why every single day begins with the understanding that purpose is not a moment of inspiration. It is a daily practice. Men often wait for the right conditions, the right motivation, or the right season of life to finally start living with intention. But purpose doesn't wait for comfort. It demands consistency. It demands repetition. It demands choices that reinforce who you are even when no one is watching. A man who treats his why as an occasional reminder never builds the life he envisions. Only the man who treats it as a daily obligation becomes the person he is meant to be. Discipline becomes the bridge between what a man believes and what he actually does. Men are naturally driven by direction, but many struggle to align their habits with their deeper values. They tell themselves they know their purpose, but their routines tell a different story. Discipline is not about perfection, it's about alignment. It's the act of making decisions that protect your purpose, even when easier options tempt you. When a man chooses discipline, he strengthens his identity. When he avoids it, he weakens the very foundation of who he claims to be. Women notice the presence or the absence of discipline long before a man says a word about his intentions. From a woman's perspective, discipline is one of the strongest indicators of a man's emotional maturity. She watches how he treats his commitments, how he manages his impulses, how he handles pressure, and how he honors his values when no one is keeping score. To her, a disciplined man feels dependable. His consistency creates safety. His routine signals responsibility. But when discipline is missing, she feels the instability instantly. She sees inconsistency not as harmless, but as a warning. Men often resist discipline because they associate it with restriction, when in truth, discipline is freedom. It frees a man from distraction, from regret, from impulsive decisions that contradict his purpose. It frees him from the frustration of living beneath his potential. Without discipline, a man's life becomes reactive. He responds to circumstances instead of shaping them. With discipline, he gains clarity, structure, and momentum. His days stop blending into each other. They begin compounding into something meaningful. Discipline becomes the proof that he takes his purpose seriously. Women deeply respect a man who lives his why through disciplined choices because it shows he has direction. She sees his structure, his focus, his ability to follow through, and she feels the stability that discipline creates. A woman won't always agree with every choice a man makes, but she will always trust a man who is consistent with his values. She interprets his discipline as strength, not the loud kind, but the quiet, reliable kind that forms the foundation of real leadership and emotional partnership. Men grow into their purpose when they commit to practicing it daily. Purpose without discipline becomes a fantasy. Purpose with discipline becomes a lifestyle. A man who wakes up every day and chooses actions that align with his why becomes someone others can trust, follow, and believe in. His discipline becomes the rhythm that reinforces his identity, sharpens his character, and transforms his intentions into tangible reality. Your environment changes the moment your choices change because the world responds to what you reinforce, not what you intend. Men often forget that their surroundings, the people they attract, the opportunities they encounter, the respect they receive, are all shaped by the decisions they make repeatedly. A man who chooses discipline, purpose, and clarity begins to alter the energy he carries, and that energy silently reshapes the environment around him. His standards rise, his relationships shift, his opportunities evolve. Nothing around him changes magically, everything changes because he does. The people you attract are a direct reflection of the choices you tolerate. Men sometimes wonder why they keep encountering the same problems, the same conflicts, or the same patterns in relationships. They assume life is happening to them, when in reality, their choices are inviting those patterns in. A man who chooses distraction will attract chaos. A man who chooses purpose will attract alignment. The moment a man begins making choices that serve his why, instead of his impulses, the wrong people naturally distance themselves, and the right people naturally draw closer. His environment reshapes to reflect his new level of intention. Women instantly notice when a man's choices begin to shift because those choices signal emotional maturity and direction. From a woman's perspective, a man's decisions reveal far more than his words. She watches how he invests his time, where he places his focus, and what he allows into his life. When she sees a man choosing growth over comfort, responsibility over excuses, and integrity over shortcuts, she feels a sense of safety and trust forming. But when his choices remain inconsistent or chaotic, she interprets it as instability. To her, his decisions are the clearest indicator of whether he is becoming a man she can believe in. Your environment becomes healthier the moment your standards rise. Men often underestimate how powerful their standards truly are. When a man raises his standards, he stops accepting the behaviors, habits, and influences that keep him stuck. He stops engaging with people who question his worth and starts connecting with those who match his values. He stops entertaining distractions and starts prioritizing direction. As his choices evolve, his environment must adapt or fall away. And in that shift, men often discover who is committed to growth and who is only comfortable with their old selves. Women value a man whose environment reflects intentional choices because it shows he's not living passively. She sees the quality of the people he surrounds himself with, the habits he maintains, the boundaries he enforces, and the goals he pursues. To her, these are signs of emotional readiness, stability, and direction. She doesn't judge a man by what he says he wants. She watches the environment he builds around himself. A man's environment is the clearest window into his identity, his discipline, and his trajectory. Your life begins to shift the moment you make choices that align with who you want to become rather than who you've been. Men often wait for the environment to change first, hoping circumstances will improve, relationships will evolve, or opportunities will appear. But the truth is simpler. Environments follow choices. When a man chooses differently, he becomes different. And when he becomes different, everything around him must adjust. The energy he carries changes, the expectations he sets rise, and the signals he sends to the world become unmistakably aligned with his purpose. Your environment is not a reflection of your destiny. It is a reflection of your daily decisions. The moment those decisions begin to serve your why with consistency and conviction, the world around you rearranges to support the man you are becoming, not the man you used to be. The Celery Test proves your purpose through action, not words, because talk is easy, but behavior is revealing. Men often believe their intentions are enough, that their values can be understood through what they say they stand for. But the world doesn't judge men by their declarations. It judges them by what they choose, what they prioritize, what they bring into their lives, and what they leave behind. The Celery Test exposes whether a man's actions truly align with his why. Because when a man walks into life's marketplace, everyone can see exactly what he puts in his cart. People trust what they can observe, not what they are told, and this is where most men unintentionally sabotage their credibility. A man may speak about discipline, but if he consistently chooses convenience, people see convenience. He may talk about loyalty, but if he entertains distractions, people see the distraction. He may describe a vision for his life, but if his habits contradict that vision, people see the contradiction. The Celery Test is the filter that reveals whether he is living from purpose or simply performing the idea of purpose. Actions don't lie. They expose the truth he may be trying to hide even from himself. Women instinctively watch a man's choices because choices are more honest than words. From a woman's perspective, a man who says he wants stability but practices inconsistency becomes difficult to trust. She evaluates him not by his promises, but by the patterns he creates. If he says he values respect but allows disrespectful environments around him, she questions his inner strength. If he says he wants commitment but avoids responsibility, she senses the lack of alignment. To her, the Celery Test is not abstract, it's practical. She looks directly into the cart of his life and sees whether his selections match his stated values. Men experience internal conflict when they claim a purpose they don't actively live out. A man who talks about becoming better but keeps choosing the same old habits feels the tension of self-betrayal. He knows when he is out of alignment, even if he doesn't say it. He feels the frustration, the restlessness, the quiet disappointment in himself. This is why the celery test is powerful. It forces a man to examine what his life is actually reflecting. It confronts him with the reality that if his actions don't match his beliefs, the world cannot take his purpose seriously. And deep down, neither can he. Your daily choices are the evidence the world uses to determine your identity, and this is where the celery test becomes transformative. When a man consistently selects what aligns with his why, even when it's inconvenient or misunderstood, people begin to trust him. They see the clarity, the discipline, the intentionality in the cart he pushes through life. They stop questioning his motives because his actions answer those questions for him. His purpose no longer feels theoretical. It becomes visible, tangible, and believable. Women respond powerfully to a man whose actions align with his values because alignment breeds trust. A woman doesn't need perfection from a man, she needs coherence. When she sees his decisions reflect his beliefs, she feels emotionally safe, grounded, and supported. A man who lives his why through action gives her confidence that he is stable, dependable, and anchored in something deeper than mood or convenience. She feels she can invest in him because he is investing in himself with consistency and integrity. His cart tells the story of a man she can follow, respect, and rely on. The celery test reshapes a man's identity by forcing him to make choices that reflect intention rather than impulse. Every item he metaphorically places in his life becomes a statement. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I'm building. When a man chooses alignment over approval, purpose over distraction, and discipline over indulgence, his environment changes, his relationships strengthen, and his influence grows. His actions become the loudest voice in the room, speaking truth about his character long before he ever opens his mouth.